Yay! Joe Biden has beaten Big Pharma by doing nothing till 2025, then having the possibility to do something, and then ultimately probably doing not much. Certainly nothing that will affect the pharmaceutical industry. Well done! Hello there, you 5.9 million awakening wonders. Thank you for joining me on this voyage towards truth. Let's nurture this light within us and find new connections so we can overcome the establishment narratives that keep us divided. We must find a way to connect if we are going to change the world, if we're going to create new leaders, new systems, leaders that don't say, oh, I've beaten Big Pharma, when what they mean is we now have the ability to regulate, but we're not going to do nothing till 2025. Even then, it's only going to affect a small number of drugs, because, of course, what we're talking about here is the Democrats' pre-election pledge to regulate Big Pharma. 90% of Americans want Big Pharma prices controlled, or rather specifically, the drugs they buy, they want to be capped. Well, let's see what Joe Biden says, and then let's have a look at what's really happened.
And as I said, I just signed into law a historic Inflation Reduction Act. It wasn't easy.
Do you see they've nicked Donald Trump's technique of having the crowd? That's the first time I've seen that. That's Donald Trump's idea, isn't it? Get the crowd behind me. People can see that I'm very popular. They're doing that now.
Take on big drug companies, but we did. I've been fighting them since I got in Congress 180 years ago.
Brilliant. Brilliant, because you are old. Well done in remembering the number 180. Let's see if you can remember the pledge that you made and how it contrasts with the regulation that's being introduced.
You know, we pay more for prescription drugs in the United States of America than any major country in the world.
Do you ever stop to pause to think, why is he boasting that the president and the government have the ability to regulate Big Pharma? Because you should be able to do that, shouldn't you? I mean, if you're the president of a country that you've been elected to represent, then that's just normal, isn't it? It's not a big deal. It's like wanting a pat on the back for not kicking your baby out the window.
Here in the United States, okay? There's no reason for it.
Well, there is a reason for it. The reason is this. The pharmaceutical industry funds the Democratic and the Republican Party. That's the reason for it. Why is this happening? I don't know. Give us a bit more money, will you, Pfizer? Oh, brilliant. Thanks for that. Yeah, it just keeps happening. Oh, thanks for that, Moderna. Why do we keep not regulating Big Pharma? Oh, thank you very much for that. It's obvious why they do it. Let's just give you a few details before we proceed. In November 2020, Biden said, I'm going to lower prescription drugs by 60%, and that's the truth. The proposal to lower drug prices had support from 90% of registered voters in their districts, according to a recent poll by Data for Progress. A government analysis found that the pharmaceutical industry should emerge mostly unscathed from the Build Back Better bill. The cost to the industry would be minimal. So their own researchers and their own analysis concludes that the pharmaceutical industry will be unscathed. What that suggests to me is that they'll nominate a few drugs to symbolically regulate while the profits are spread across the industry and new tax breaks are offered to them to alleviate any losses that will be caused by this new legislation. I don't know that for a fact. I've just been alive for a while and I've noticed that government seems to cooperate with big business. Also, this bill doesn't affect any new drugs that are introduced. So, for example, if some new, I don't know, off the top of my head, vaccine was introduced, that wouldn't be affected. If you're introducing a law, why don't you introduce a law that does its job? See me, if I hear we are going to reduce drug prices by 60%, that means for me that if I'm paying $10 for something on Monday, on Tuesday, I want to pay $4 for it. I want it to be 60% less money. Anything less than that is a lie and probably just a piece of propaganda to distract us from the fact that really they're doing nothing that will impede the interests of the powerful. I need to see real change in order for me to adapt my default position. What the government do is they serve the interests of the powerful, they extract public money, give it to private interests, and if ever there's a sort of a rising tension because people are so pissed off and furious, for example, by the pandemic, war, cost of living crisis, they'll think of some little tiny pipsqueak measures to dial it down. Like in our country, the UK, there's a cost of living crisis, there's an energy bill crisis, people are starting to mobilise and challenge it. The new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, said, we're going to cap energy bills at £2,500 a year. But that means that taxpayer money will still be going to the energy companies. The energy companies aren't going to lose anything, and ordinary people still foot the bill. They'll find a way of getting your money. They're just going to give you a little bit of propaganda along with a robbery.
For the last several decades, many of us have been trying to fix the problem. But for decades, Big Pharma tried to block giving lower drug prices for those on Medicare or anywhere else.
Doesn't that statement in itself tell you the nature of the problem? After decades of trying, we've got a tiny pipsqueak mouse victory. Doesn't that show you that the system is broken? Because in a proper democracy, if 90% of people said, we want drug prices capped, you just cap drug prices. Now, I know there'll be people watching this go, oh, it's not that simple, it's not that simple. It is. What you do is you stop accepting their money through lobbying, you stop accepting their sponsorship, you stop allowing them to dominate the media, and you stop trying to tell ordinary people that they're having a big victory when really you're just mugging them from a different direction.
For decades, Big Pharma won year in, year out because they own chunks of the Congress.
They still do.
Because they had to help, like your senior senator, Ron Johnson, who said,
that's the problem. It's not the war in Ukraine. It's not the pandemic. It's fucking Ron Johnson.
No, I want to say what he said. He said he opposed lowering drug costs because it would result in punishing the pharmaceutical industry.
How dare Joe Biden use the legitimate sentiment of antipathy towards drug companies to legitimize and embolden a small pipsqueak sanction? All they've done is, in 2025, they'll have the ability to regulate. They'll only be regulating 10 drugs, and their own study says the pharmaceutical industry won't be affected. So if you're framing this, as Joe Biden very carefully is, as a fight between government and big pharma, because they know that's what you want, imagine a fight where the opponent is not affected. Is that a victory? If there's a boxing match and the opponent is not affected, can you stand at the end in the middle of the ring with your fist aloft saying, I really had a great victory there after 20 years of trying. It's a great triumph. Your opponent is unaffected. Yeah, but still, it's good TV.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I mean, come on, man.
He's really pleased with himself here, isn't he? He really thinks he's doing a good job. He really thinks he's making up for all the times he's fallen asleep and farted. Well, it hasn't.
Not this year. We beat Pharma this year.
Steady on, old boy. You'll go to the toilet in your trousers.
We beat Pharma this year, and it mattered. We're going to change people's lives. We finally beat Pharma.
In 2025, things might be a bit cheaper. In the case of 10... Is it 2025 yet?
We beat Pharma this year, and it mattered.
Whilst I'm as excited as the next person to see an elderly man shaking his fist, let's see what's actually happened. The Build Back Better drug pricing framework is not a bad outcome for the industry. Evercore ISI analysts wrote in a note to clients earlier this month, not all drugs will be subject to negotiation. Instead, the plan would kick off in 2025 with a focus on 10 Medicare medicines, followed by 15 medicines in 2026, 2027, and 20 medicines in 2028 and beyond. Most drugs wouldn't be affected by negotiations, the analysts said. So, what a great victory. What drugs won't be affected? Most drugs won't be affected. Hooray! Most drugs remain unaffected. Now, some people will be watching this saying, yeah, but at least it's a small victory. At least it's something. That's exactly the problem. That is exactly what we've been trained to accept. They're not as bad as they could be. At least it's something. That's what the Democrat Party are. The at least it's something party. That's what we're offered in our country. At least it's something. And these are not just pummeling you into the ground with a golden fist of money. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for the pipsqueak changes. We deserve better. We deserve legitimate change. We deserve what democracy pledges to offer us. Meanwhile, price hike caps under the framework would roll out in 2023. The caps would be tied to the rate of inflation, and the rule would apply to commercial insurance coverage too, that could ultimately entice drug makers to boost their products' launch prices, the Evercore team said. Do you know what that means? It just means that they'll ultimately launch drugs with a higher price, just like classic negotiation. This car's worth $50,000. Okay, well, I'll give you $20,000. Done. It was never worth $50,000. In 2021, Democrats accounted for roughly 60% of the $177 million in pharmaceutical industry lobbying and campaign donations. So both parties receive a lot of money from the pharmaceutical industry, but the Democrat Party receives a bit more. So all that time that Joe Biden was bravely fighting them, he was taking their money, or at least his party was. Let's dive deeper. According to Open Secrets, in 2020, the biggest recipient of donations from the pharmaceutical industry was Joe Biden, who received $8.6 million. How like Joe Biden to claim he's been in a fight with the pharmaceutical industry when in fact he's been in a fight with himself. I'll get you, Joe Biden. I'll get you, old copper-knob or corn pop or corn cob, whoever you are. Joe, there's no one else in the fucking room, darling. Just you and a bunch of money and some propaganda. So there you go. Is this a massive victory for the Democrat Party and Joe Biden, and more importantly for ordinary Americans who are struggling to pay for their drugs? Is it? Or is this just another piece of propaganda that ultimately will not negatively impact the pharmaceutical industry and will not significantly improve the lives of ordinary Americans? And should we accept these kind of piecemeal pledges, these mealy-mouthed promises, as the threshold of what's possible in America, which we were trained to believe is the greatest country in the world? Is this the best that democracy can do? Is this the best that Joe Biden can deliver? Should we be asking for more? Who knows? Let me know in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. Sign up to my mailing list right now. We've got some important news for you. We're making some big changes and I want you to know about them first because I want to hold you close to my heart. More important than any of that is that you please stay free.